The studio lights glared bright and hot, but Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. She sat tall in her seat, her palms steady in her lap, her eyes fixed on Stephen Colbert. The audience, usually buzzing with pre-show excitement, had fallen into a tense silence. This wasn't how she imagined the interview would go, not with millions watching live, not with her name trending across every corner of the internet. And certainly not with her character under fire. But life had taught her one truth: when storms come, you don't run. You anchor yourself in grace. It all began 3 weeks earlier, when Karoline had quietly used her platform to fund a literacy program in a forgotten New Hampshire town. There was no press release, no camera crew, no social media fanfare, just books, teachers, children, and hope. But anonymity was a luxury she could never afford for long. A blurry photo of her standing in a rundown school library circulated online, triggering speculation and chatter. Then came the viral tweet from a comedian who accused her of hypocrisy, claiming she played savior on weekends and pushed a political agenda on weekdays. The fire spread fast. Late-night hosts picked it up. Memes exploded. And Colbert, ever the master of satire, invited her on the show with a smile that masked a deeper agenda. "Karoline," he said, smoothing his cue cards, "a lot of people are wondering, are you trying to rebrand yourself as a saint now?" The audience chuckled. She didn't. Instead, Karoline leaned forward, her voice calm but carrying the quiet weight of someone who had bled privately and healed without applause. "Stephen," she said, "what people forget is that kindness doesn't need a camera. I didn't do it to be seen, I did it because I remember what it's like to be invisible." She told them about growing up in a cramped house with 2 jobs between 3 adults and never enough food. She shared how her 3rd-grade teacher, Miss Reynolds, brought her an old coat from a thrift store one winter, the first gift she'd ever received without a birthday or holiday attached. "It wasn't about the coat," she said softly, her voice cracking. "It was about someone noticing I was cold." The audience shifted. Jokes were expected. But this? This was real. Colbert, sensing the shift, pressed again. "But you have to admit, it's hard for people to believe in genuine intentions these days. Especially from public figures." Karoline smiled, not with arrogance but with knowing. "That's exactly why we need to do it anyway. Not because we're perfect, but because it matters more when we're not." Then she did something no one expected. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a letter, carefully folded and slightly worn at the edges. "This is from a girl named Ivy. She's 10. She said she never liked books until she read one from our program. She wrote, 'Now I read to my little brother every night. He doesn't cry as much anymore.' That's not rebranding, Stephen. That's rebuilding." Silence fell, not awkward but reverent. The camera panned slowly across the audience. People leaned forward, eyes glassy, hearts touched. Even Stephen, seasoned as he was, softened. He set his cue cards aside. "Can I read something too?" he asked. Karoline nodded. He cleared his throat, reached beneath his desk, and pulled out a printed email. "This is from a woman in North Carolina. She wrote our show after hearing you'd be a guest. She said, 'I may not agree with Karoline politically, but when she helped raise money for my son's surgery through a fundraiser she had no obligation to support, well, it changed everything I thought about her.'" He paused. "I didn't think I'd read that out loud, but here we are." Something shifted. Something big. In a world addicted to outrage, the room had tasted sincerity, and it was humbling. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't retaliate. She didn't clap back with vengeance. Instead, she looked into the camera, speaking now not just to Stephen, but to the millions watching. "I'm not asking anyone to agree with me on everything. I'm not perfect. I get things wrong. But I believe we all have something in common: we want our children to feel safe, to feel seen, to know they matter. If I can help do that, even quietly, then it's worth all the noise." She stood up slowly, applause building, not forced or polite but heartfelt. Stephen joined her, extending his hand. "Thank you for being here, Karoline. Really." As the credits rolled, something remarkable happened online. Hashtags shifted. Comments turned from venom to vulnerability. People started sharing their own stories, of quiet acts of kindness, of times they'd judged too quickly, of how one person's compassion made a world of difference. But the most unexpected moment came the next morning. A small clip from the interview had gone viral. Not the drama, not the accusation, but the letter from Ivy. Within hours, book donations poured into that little town in New Hampshire. Volunteers offered to mentor. Authors pledged to send signed copies. A librarian posted a photo of 3 kids sitting shoulder to shoulder, reading aloud, giggling. Karoline watched all of this unfold not from a podium, but from her kitchen, coffee in hand, hair still damp from the shower. She smiled, not for herself, but for Ivy. For the little brother who cried less. For the woman in North Carolina who learned that compassion can come from unexpected corners. And for everyone who realized that fire doesn't always have to burn, it can warm too. Later that week, she received a message that she'd keep framed on her office wall. It read simply, "You reminded me what it means to believe in people again." That was all she ever wanted. Not fame. Not credit. Just the quiet ripple of change. Because sometimes, the most powerful rebuttal isn't a soundbite, it's a life lived with heart. And that's how Karoline Leavitt, with grace and grit, turned a national moment of judgment into a global moment of awakening. Proving that in the face of cynicism, the most radical thing we can do, is care. Moral. True strength lies not in how loudly we defend ourselves, but in how quietly we choose to do good, especially when no one is watching. In a world quick to judge, kindness, humility, and compassion remain the most powerful responses. Sometimes, the most inspiring change begins with a single act of selfless humanity.